It was a quiet, peaceful morning on the Cool Beans Railway, and Edward and Henry had just woke up ready for the day. But Edward noticed that Henry was feeling down and wanted to know why. "Hey, Henry, it appears things don't seem to be very well with you this morning, if you forgive me for mentioning it." "You're quite right, Edward. All I've done the past few days is shunt trucks. The coaches have been having issues with their brakes and so on. I haven't had any entertainment. I feel like I haven't done anything that's important." "Oh, don't worry, Henry. I'm sure you'll find something at some point." But unfortunately, Henry never did.
He was unhappy when he had to go shunt trucks in the yard. He was even more unhappier about the way Scruffy spoke to him.
"Puh! Look at the size of you," laughed Scruffy. "I'd be surprised if you had the strength to move even one truck."
Henry didn't care. He just ignored him and went about his work. Henry spent the rest of the morning shunting the other trucks for the other engines. Then, things began to get out of hand. As Henry went over to the turntable to collect the other trucks, they began to tease him.
Poor Henry, he works, he suffers, he'll work so hard until his wheels get rusty."
This made Henry very cross. He was so cross that he bumped the freight cars so hard that they crashed into the turntable. "You silly engine!" shouted a workman. "Now it will take a long time to repair this turntable, which will cause confusion and delay." The other engines were cross that they had to fetch their own freight cars. They glared at Henry as they went by. But Toby felt sorry for Henry. "It's all right, Henry," said Toby. "I know you didn't mean to cause the accident. Besides, I know you deep down you don't mean any harm."
Henry was glad Toby cared for him, but he was still worried about how angry I would be with him that night.
But thankfully, I wasn't too angry with him when I came to see him that night.
"Henry, you have caused confusion and delay today. I thought you could manage freight cars, but apparently you can't. Maybe a day's work at the docks tomorrow might clear your smoke box."
"Yes, Gabriel. Sorry, Gabriel," said Henry. Henry couldn't help but feel bad for what he did today at the shunting yards by biffing the cars into the turntable. He hoped that he wouldn't mess up his next job tomorrow morning when he had to work at the docks. So he decided to get a good night's rest to overcome what had happened today.
The next morning he woke up bright, early, and cheerful and went to go meet up with Neil, Jinty, and Aiden at the docks. They were pleased to see him. "Oh, Henry, my friend," said Neil. "We're glad you're here to help us today, laddie." "I'm glad too," said Henry. "Yesterday was pretty rough, but I'm off to a fresh start." "Well, that's good to know," said Jinty. "Are those my cars over there?" Henry asked.
"Only some of them. There's masses more in the sidings,"
Aiden said. "The more the merrier," Henry said happily.
Henry spent the rest of the morning shunting the other trucks for the other engines. The trucks were very well behaved. He shunted a train of coal for Thomas, fruit and vegetables for Emily, milk for Neville, and he even shunted a train of Coca-Cola for Murdoch. Neil, Jinty, and Aiden were impressed with his hard work. That evening, the dock manager was talking to Henry's driver.
"Derek has overheated. He won't be able to take the goods train to Miss Jenny's construction site. You and Henry will have to take it."
"Can't you send somebody else?" said Henry.
"No, Henry," said the dock manager. "You're the only engine available."
"Don't worry, Henry," said his driver. "The construction site is not that far from us. Besides, you'll be home in time to get your rest before you know it."
Henry had to agree, but he still felt nervous inside.
That night, Henry backed down on the train and was ready to go. "Be careful out there tonight, Henry," said Jinty.
"Thank you for coming to help us today,"
said Aiden. "I will, and thanks for having me over here to help," said Henry. "The line can be spooky," said Neil. "Thank you for the warning," said Henry, and he chuffed away to Miss Jenny's construction site.
Henry arrived on time, and he made his delivery for Miss Jenny's construction site. Then he set off for home. That's when the trouble began. The fog came down. Neil was right, said Henry. Suddenly everything does look spooky. Then, up ahead, Henry's driver saw a signal, but they couldn't see that it was red, so they decided to go slow and stop by the nearest station. The points had been set in the wrong direction. Henry's driver and fireman didn't know about this. The worst is over, said Henry. Now we're away. But they were wrong. Then they approached an unknown area which had lots of loud noises. I think it's best if we wait until the fog clears. What are those strange sounds? Henry shivered. Then the fog slowly lifted. Oh no! Cried Henry. We're in the scrapyards! Henry's driver and fireman decided to go get help. Henry was all alone. He wished he was back at Tidmouth's sheds with the other engines. Then, 2 diesels that looked exactly like Diesel 10 approached him.
Got you this time, Henry. You'll make very fine scrap indeed. Buffer him, Spin.
The 2 diesels took him to the large smelter shed.
Bye-bye, Henry.
Henry looked up. Above him was a huge red claw. Help! Cried Henry. I'm too useful to be scrapped! But the grabber was not listening. Henry shut his eyes in horror, hoping that the claw would stop before it picked him up. Just as the grabber was about to get a hold of Henry, it stopped. Henry opened his eyes.
Relax, Henry, I'm here.
Gabriel, boy, am I happy to see you.
I saw everything that was happening, so I had to come in and save you. I'm so sorry Stretch and Spin tried to scrap you. They are our new Ironworks diesels. They've been troublesome lately ever since they first arrived. I will scold them tomorrow morning. But as for you, tomorrow you can go back to pulling coaches and trucks again.
Oh, thank you so much, Gabriel. If it wasn't for you sending me to the docks, I would have never been able to make my delivery to Miss Jenny's construction site in time.
And if I never helped you in time, I would have never been able to find another Henry.
Henry felt so heartwarmed after what he had heard he ran a tear in his eyes. The next day, Stretch and Spin were severely scolded by me. And let's just say, the things I said to them were not very polite. Meanwhile, Henry came home to Tidmouth's sheds. There was a chorus of whoops and whistles and cheers from engines of all shapes and sizes. Soon the railway was back to normal and the engines were working hard again. The railway had never been such a busy place before. Engines were working harder than ever than they used to, their trains were always on time, and the people were very impressed. And Thomas could see that Henry was happy.